I want to thank Minister Brown. I want to thank my colleagues, Deputy Devlin and Deputy Kenny, for their contribution. I think it's been very beneficial that we have this debate. As all speakers have recognised, changing this law is not really going to resolve the problem. But legislation itself is a very blunt instrument. And therefore, when we introduce legislation into this House, sometimes it can generate a debate and a discussion about an important issue. Obviously, when it comes to legislation, it's very difficult to implement into that legislation the type of broader issues that we were discussing in the debate here, such as education, such as training, such as just trying to ensure that we can attack the inequality that is behind so much of criminal activity that takes place in our society. I want to thank the Minister for putting forward some very important information and data in his speech. I think it is very important that when we're having a discussion, whether it be on specifically amending law or we're having a discussion on the policy issues, that we do so from a position of information and empirical evidence. I think it was interesting to note that the Minister has acknowledged that between 2010 and 2016 there has been an increase in the number of knives seized each year in that time. That's something that I think was alluded to by my colleague, Deputy Devlin. However, it's also important to note that there was a reduction in the number of instances where knives were involved from 1,500 in 2019 versus 1,300 in 2020. I don't have the up-to-date information in respect of the instance of knife crime. The Minister does, but I think it's very beneficial that he's putting that information before the House this afternoon. It's also beneficial that he's given us information in respect of the slight increase in hospital discharges following an assault by knives between 2018 and 2019. I think, obviously, I'm not suggesting, and I don't think anyone in the House is suggesting, that young people should be targeted with increased penalties and sentences if they're apprehended carrying a knife for the first time. There's a huge amount of discretion that is given to our judiciary when it comes to imposing sentences upon people who've been convicted of offences. And I wouldn't like to see a situation develop where boys, children or young men who are apprehended with knives immediately face prosecution or indeed the sanction of a criminal sentence. That's why I agree with the Minister that the youth justice strategy is so important in trying to divert young people away from a pathway of crime. We need to recognise that there are certain communities which are very much that their young people within them are targeted and are subjected to, I suppose, opportunities to engage themselves in crime that we have to ensure don't persist longer in those communities. I think we need to recognise that certain communities require further attention from the state to ensure that young children, boys and young men and girls and young women indeed, who are facing through difficult struggles and inequalities in their life, that they are not led down the pathway of crime that so many of them could go down unless they are deterred from it. I welcome what the Minister said about the model that operated in Scotland. That seems to be working very effectively. I was interested to hear what Deputy Kenny had to say in respect of the experience in Boston as well. What these models show is that if you do implement changes in policy and have a holistic approach to a problem such as this, that it can result in the reduction of dangerous instance of knife attack. And that's why I think it's important that we try to put together, as the Minister is trying to do, a policy in respect of it. Listen, I'm fully aware that the legislation itself, if it is enacted, it's not going to be a major part of the solution. But as I say, the purpose of legislation, particularly in its early phases going through this House, is to try to generate a debate on policy issues that we must seek to attain. And that's why I welcome the response of the Minister and indeed Deputy Kenny and Deputy Devlin in respect to the proposal. And I think when the bill goes beyond second stage, we'll have a further opportunity at that stage to look at it in a broader approach and to try to ensure that we can try to put in place policies that will have an impact in reducing the incidence of knife crime, but will also have an impact in reducing the number of people who get involved in carrying knives and as a result lead themselves down a pathway towards trouble. Just finally, last Count Corla, I'm conscious I may be the last deputy to speak in the Convention Centre. Hopefully I am. Hopefully it will never be the case that we're back here as TDs, or I know the Senate was here as well discussing legislation. I just want to thank Cathaoirleach and Lascan Corla for the work that you have done. I want to thank all the staff who've been here. I think we've been here since last May or June. It's been a difficult time for members of the Oireachtas. Sometimes politicians aren't given any sympathy by the public, and we're not looking for sympathy. But I'm very conscious of colleagues who were elected for the first time in 2020 that they haven't really yet had an opportunity to settle into life in Leinster House, which is a lot more easier to work with than having to come down to the convention centre. But I want to thank you, and I want to thank all the staff for the great work that's been done here and facilitating us coming down here. And I hope we won't be back here again, notwithstanding the fact that we all did enjoy our time here.